Hey, welcome to Sylvie's Technique Vlog. If you're not familiar with my technique vlogs, basically I introduce something that I've been working on. They're not necessarily demonstrational or instructional or anything like that. It's actually just vlogging about me thinking about some technique that I've been working on as of late and how it's changing my Muay or different realizations that I've had about it, how to apply it, that kind of stuff. This one's a little bit different. In this technique vlog, I'm going to be talking about mental training. Mental training is a technique, but what's kind of remarkable about it is that it's very hard to see it as the techniques that it is and that it's out of which it's comprised. I've been successfully using mental training for probably 8 years. So I've been doing Muay Thai for about 14 years, which is kind of incredible to me now at this point. But mental training is something that I'm aware of. It's definitely something that I've known about and have had not only awareness of, but even access to for a really long time. One of my brothers is a sports psychologist, and he works with the Air Force in Arizona. He's brilliant at his job. He's really good. He's very good at supporting me and touching base with me and contacting me and being like, do you need my resources or my help with any of these things? And when I had this, I just fought for the WBC minimum weight title, world title here in Hua Hin against an Italian woman, Elisabetta Salinas. And in preparation for that fight, my brother contacted me and was like, can I help you at all with any of your mental training? How's that going? And I had actually already started working on it myself in preparation for that fight. And I want you guys to note how I'm talking about this, which is that I was not doing mental training. And then because I had this fight coming up, I started doing my mental training. That's really not the best way to do things. Absolutely doing it like that is better than not doing it at all. But having mental training being part of your training all the time, for me to say I've been training in Muay Thai for 14 years, I kind of start and stop with my mental training, is not the greatest thing. People are familiar with kind of fight camps. That's not something I do. But because people are familiar with fight camps, I think that they maybe would forgive my approach to that mental training as being that I was using it specifically for a high pressure, high risk, high reward situation. But something that kind of resonated with me, especially in preparing for this fight, is that something that maybe people who aren't as familiar with mental training or who don't know as much about it in practice, many people understand the concept of cardio, and that cardio is something that you basically need to maintain and you need to work on. And there are times that people are doing one thing and they realize that this is much harder than it should be, and they're like, it's my cardio. If I make my cardio better, then I'm able to withstand this longer. I'm able to endure longer in my training and that kind of stuff. Mental training is like this. It's not fun. It's not my favorite thing to do. But having strength in that, having good cardio, mental training, allows you to do the things that you really do want to do and that are really hard. It makes it easier. It allows you to withstand a lot more. So in the same way that you want to maintain your cardio, you don't just start running only for a fight. You may increase your running for a fight or something like this. You need to do your mental training in the same way that you do cardio, in that confidence and calmness and kind of focus and things like this. These are things that need to be maintained. And so in the same way that you can't just suddenly have good cardio a week before your fight, or you can't just only have good cardio at this point, having not worked on it for a really long time. This is the same thing with strong mental toughness and things like this, is you can't just select train it. You can't just train it for a week before your fight and expect to have it at the ready. You should really think of it more like cardio. So when I do my technique vlogs, what I really like to do is I have a free version. This goes up on YouTube and it's accessible to the public and anyone can look at it. What I really like to do is in that public part have something that you can take with you immediately to the gym and start working on. I really want to give you some little seed that you can use immediately. And then in the longer version, which is for my patrons, I give much more in-depth detail about specifically what I was using for leading up to this fight, as well as much more in-depth talk about what kind of mental training and the mental side of things does to your training, and what I experienced in this fight and things like that. So it's important to me to give you something in the free version that you can take with you. So I'm going to do that. But I highly recommend if you are a patron, watching the full version, because mental training is not just some small little thing. And I'm not an expert in it by any means. Again, you know, I have access through my brother, who's a sports psychologist, but most of what I do with my mental training does not come through him. I highly recommend, in my own practice of this, in my own experience with mental training, I basically go out and find something that speaks a little bit to me, that I'm like, I can do this, and then I kind of like follow it and go with it. So some of you who have followed me for a long time might know that my real kind of like dive into mental training, where it really kind of like blossomed for me and I finally started to understand it and its benefits, was about 8 years ago. I had this really awful performance, a really bad performance against Yodcherry Sidyotong here in Pattaya, and it was really embarrassing. I call it shitting the bed, excuse my language, but I did really badly in that fight. And my trainer was not nice to me about it, and it was really, really rough. And only a few days after that fight, I had another fight, which was really big, high pressure. It was on the Queen's birthday. It was at Sanam Luang, which is the Royal Fields. It was a big deal. At that time, women's fights on TV were basically only on the Queen's birthday. And it was a pretty big deal to be able to fight at Royal Fields. And I was facing Saya Ito, who was called the Genius. She was a young Japanese fighter. Lots of experience, just very, very good fighter out of Japan. People might be familiar with her name more now as well, because she's recently on the stage at like Super Champ Channel 8 fights and tournaments and stuff like that. She's amazing. But so I had this like horrible, horrible performance. And then a few days later, I was fighting Saya Ito in this very high pressure fight. And in that short amount of time, I realized there's no way I can change my technique. Like, there's no way I can do any kind of physical training that's going to alter the performance that I had in this fight versus what I want to do in the Saya Ito fight. And so I really just buckled down and was like, this is going to be mental. Like, this has to be mental. And at that time, I basically just did like a Google search, and I was looking for books on tape, which, you know, is like an MP3 file now. I'm old enough that I call things books on tape still. But it was old. It was from like the 90s or something. It's this dude with this very, very thick New Jersey accent. He's kind of amazing. I can't remember what it's called now. If I find it, I'll definitely put it. I've written about it, so I have it in resources somewhere. But basically, he gives a lot of like kind of stories and little anecdotes to like inspire and think about these different things. One of my favorite little stories in that book is talking about positivity or optimism. And it's a story about these frogs that are all going somewhere, and two of them fall in a hole. And maybe one of them falls in a hole. But so the one that falls in the hole is deaf, like he can't hear. And all the other frogs are like yelling at him, and they're like, give up, you can't hop out, there's no way, you're gonna die down there. And he keeps hopping, he keeps trying to come out, and finally he gets out. And when he gets out and they're like, oh my god, how did you do this, we were all telling you to give up, he's like, I'm deaf, I thought you were cheering for me. I looked up and saw everyone yelling and thought you were cheering for me. It's one of my favorite stories from that mental training. And it's that mental training is not just these kind of like feel-good anecdotes, but often these feel-good anecdotes give you a morsel of understanding. They just let you understand the importance of a concept that's being introduced and how to work on that. When I talk to my brother often, he'll kind of give me a very like general idea of some things that I should be working on, and they're so non-specific. And when he tells me about them, I can kind of pull them into the specifics of what my situation is, or I can ask him a question about what my specific situation is that allows him to kind of like specify or fine tune that thing that he's trying to talk to me about in a more general sense. And the way that I would compare this personally is like, he gives me a bunch of colors. Like he just gives me a whole crayon box of colors that are the tools of mental training, or that are concepts of mental training that I should be using in order to like focus on my training or bring myself back into the present moment or something like that. And with this color box, I can be like, oh, I'm drawing a tree, so I'm going to pull this green down. And like, oh, well, I'm going to have a bench, so I'm going to pull this brown down. It's that kind of thing. Like you really, the way that you can kind of start your own mental training process is very vague to begin with. You can literally just go and like go on Audible or like go on Amazon and look at mental training or things that are about mental. So like I looked up confidence for this fight, and I ended up finding a book that was really, really helpful for me that's about confidence. And I listened to that while I was training. And then as it was getting near the end of my training, where it's like, okay, now most of the training is done, now it's time to like really just focus on, getting in the ring and fighting, I had a second book that I started listening to that was about pressure. So I didn't mean for it to work out that way, but it worked out really well to, during my training, have this book that I was focusing on about confidence and all of these different things that kind of allow you to refocus and not blow your mind out about like these generalities about who you are and what it means that you didn't block that kick or whatever. And then when the training's done, that was the time that the pressure book actually started making sense. I started listening to it while I was still training and I just was not connecting to it. But when the training was done and it was time to really like address the fact that this was a high pressure fight, that's when that pressure book started really calling to me. So when you're looking for your own resources, it might be like this. You need to look at lots of different resources, and you'll start looking at something and something will speak to you, take it. Like when something is speaking to you, take it. When I first did my successful mental training 8 years ago for the Duuglas-Ittu fight, which I ended up winning, which was a really big moment for me, the mental training that helped so much, that one had a lot of guided practices in it. So that had guided meditation, that had guided calming, like using visualization in order to slow your breath, or using visualization in order to let go of things that you're kind of struggling with in your training and things like that. So if you can find a resource that has like guided practices in it, that's a really good place to start if you're starting from nothing, as I was 8 years ago. So I'm going to go into what I used in training and practicing and preparing for this title fight that I just fought this past Saturday for my patrons. So for those of you who are watching the free version, please just do something to start your mental training journey. I don't like really using the word journey that much anymore, but to start your process and your familiarity with mental training, you'll learn a lot just from like starting to work with it. You really just need to start at all. And if you would like to become a patron, click on the link in the description below. I'm going to go into all the things that I was working on for this fight that I just had that was very, very high pressure, much higher than the original Duuglas-Ittu fight, although comparatively, given what my journey was back then, what my journey is here I am using that word again, I think it's pretty similar. So yeah, thank you guys for watching the technique vlog. I hope you guys like it. And if you are a patron, stay tuned. Here we go.